Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
As I mentioned earlier in my preview of the program this morning, I have a book to give away today, and it's put out by the man himself, Paul Fahey. And the title of the book, A Celebration of Kiwi Motorsport Legend, The Life Story of a Lucky Bugger. Now, for those who don't know Paul, well, Paul dominated saloon car racing in New Zealand, must be for a decade or so, between about 65, 75, and during that time he had more wins at Pukekui, Levin, Bay Park and Wigram than any other driver, and he defeated all of the Australian touring car champions of the period. So what a lot of people might not know is that he is also one of a talented few who represented New Zealand on both 2 wheels and 4. So I've got Paul here off his wheels, sitting back to talk to us this morning. Morning, Paul.
Good morning.
What a terrible place you're living. What a terrible place you're living in.
Yeah, we call it paradise. It's a bit like Kapiti. It's on the other side of the island, facing east though, and we do have a very pleasant weather in Pawanui, yep. And it's a lovely place to retire to.
It is indeed. Paul, how long have you been writing books, or is this the first one you've written?
This is the first effort.
Yes.
It took 4 years because I needed a lot of prodding to get it going. When I retired from motorsport, I gave a lot of talks at Probus and car clubs and motorcycle clubs, and after one such talk, which took about 30 minutes, a chap came up to me, well known, and he said to me, "You should write a book." And I said, "No, I'm not a book writing person." He said, "No." He said, "You've just had a wonderful life." He said, "And if you ever did write a book, you should call it The Life of a Lucky Bugger." And I walked away from that meeting thinking, well, I should put it down and for my grandchildren and et cetera. And I started. That was 4 years ago, and I died on the project, and it went cold, and then I got prodded again by some other people, and then I got prodded again, and finally, after 4 years, I produced what's on sale now, and I can tell you, I'm not going to go through it again. It's the one and only.
Well, I tell you what, you made a magnificent job of this, and the photos in it, Paul, are just absolutely amazing. I look at the old Cortina Mark 1, I think, racing there at one stage. I'm not sure which park that was.
Yes, see, I think I was very lucky in that all through my life I met the right people at the right stages in my life. When I was a mechanic, and then when I raced motorbikes, and then when I was racing cars, people came along and helped me in such a way that I couldn't help them on occasion but be successful. All I had to do was pull it together.
Yes.
And so, the lucky side of my life, and you do need in life a lot of luck, because over the years I've seen a lot of people die in accidents and with health problems, etc. But I'm coming up 85 and I'm still here. So that quotation on the book, Lucky Bugger, really applies to me. And I think I made the book readable for all ages, and it might inspire people, young people, to get cracking, because we live in a wonderful country, and if you've got the desire to do something, you can achieve it in this country. It's a lot easier to achieve things in this country than, say, a country like maybe America or the UK and even Australia. It just far more people contesting for a certain thing, and they produce the champions. But in New Zealand, it was a little bit easier, not quite so competitive. And I was lucky that I was born in New Zealand and not somewhere else in the world.
Yes, and I think that appropriate type or life story of a lucky bugger. When I didn't realise until I read the book here, that you actually raced motorbikes in the Isle of Man. And I was watching the Isle of Man the other night, and it scares the heck out of me just to watch it these days. What was it like riding on a motorbike those days?
Well, as the book says, and you probably know, there's a lot of people have died in the Isle of Man.
Yes.
The Isle of Man for motorcyclists is the Mecca. It's like Mount Everest and the Matterhorn. For climbing people, that's their goal, is to climb it and say, I climbed the Matterhorn or I climbed Everest, etc. My goal was to ride at the Isle of Man, and it really taught me a lot about life and how you could die very easily at high speed on the Isle of Man. It's a public road. It's 37 miles around. It's very, very dangerous, and the speeds they do today. When I was there, the chap Bob McIntyre broke the first 100-mile-an-hour lap, and that was quite sensational. Well, the riders today average 134 miles an hour.
Yes.
And to average 134 miles an hour around a public road with curbs and fences and rock walls and etc. is just amazing. And I took my wife there in 1968 to show her the Isle of Man, and we were driving around in a little rental car, and she said to me, when are we getting on the course? I said, we're on it. She said, you raced on this? And I said, yes. She said, you must have been mad. And I said, well, that maybe helped a wee bit.
Yeah, that's right.
She couldn't believe that the people could go so fast on, because there are very few straights in the Isle of Man. It's all corners and very high-speed bends, so a mistake can be very costly.
Yeah, sure. I used to go as a kid and watch Rod Coleman riding around Waverley on the road circuit up there. Did you ever ride up around that particular part of the area?
Yes, I rode there. At Clubman, Rod was my hero. Rod won the Isle of Man in 1954. He's a wonderful rider, one of New Zealand's best riders. And I knew Rod personally, and when he won in the Isle of Man, that really got me cracking. I went to the Isle of Man in 1956, 2 years later, and Rod and his efforts in the years previous, 52, 53 and 54, had paved the way for a lot of Kiwi riders like myself, and we got a great reception, and we were treated very, very well by all people there, because they held Rod in high respect because of what he had done while he was racing there.
Yes, and you also raced up here at Levin. That was around the inside of the racing track, wasn't it, at that time,
yeah.
The horse racing track?
That was one of the first purpose-built circuits in New Zealand, built by a chap I got to know quite well, Ron Frost, who had Frost Motors in Levin, and he got a group of people together. Ron was a immigrant from England, and he'd raced in England, and he thought a racetrack would be the ideal thing, rather, because most of the races held in New Zealand were around airfields, like Ohaka or Wigram, or on road circuits. And Ron decided to build a purpose-built track, sealed track, and it was about 1.25 miles round. It was a very tight little circuit. It was a great circuit to race on because you couldn't rest. It was all corners, and I had some great victories at Levin and some great races. I was also well beaten by one of my adversaries, Red Dawson. Was a favourite there because of his style of driving.
Yes.
And Red won at the international meeting, and I always remember the grin on Red's face afterwards said it all.
Yes,
he was quite delighted.
Yes. Jim Richard, you raced against him too, did you?
Yes. I raced the last meeting I ever raced at Levin, and Jim beat me by a car length in the invitation, the main race of the day. I was on pole position, and in the first corner somebody hit me from behind and shot me infield, so I ended up last. But I had about 15 laps to work my way through the field, and I got on Jim's tail on the main straight, and it was nearly a photo finish. So it was a great race. The crowd enjoyed it, and I was beaten by a wonderful driver.
Yes. What was your favourite car to drive, Paul?
Well, the Escort, I had a Ford Escort that was built in England. There was only 2 of them in the world, built by a company called Alan Mann. Alan Mann it was in motor racing. They built GT40s for Le Mans for Ford. They were paid a lot of money by Ford to produce special racing cars, and Alan Mann produced the British Touring Car Championship winning car for Frank Gardner of Australia, and I saw that in 1968, and I bought the number 2 car, which was in pieces when I actually bought it, because Ford decided to step out of circuit racing and go into rallying. So they abandoned the number 2 car, and it arrived in New Zealand in a pile of bits, but it was all there. The engines, diffs, and the whole lot, and my mechanic Ray Stone and a few others put it together, and we had a wonderful 2 years in that car. We were able to beat the Mustangs, particularly on circuits like Levin, which were tight, and the Mustangs were at a bit of a disadvantage because the circuit was tight and they couldn't use their 500 or 600 horsepower, but I could use my 250 horsepower Escort to its full advantage. So yes, it was great racing at Levin, Wigram, and Pukekohe Bay Park, all those places in the Escort. I think I won, I think the record book show I won about 22 races in that car.
Yes.
And I won the New Zealand Championship in that car. So that was probably my favourite car.
Well, I suppose it's still in your blood in some ways, Paul. You love watching the motorsports these days, and would like to be out there on the track, I should imagine.
Well, I'm a realist. I had my day at the top. I didn't want to be remembered as a has-been. So when I retired, I was at the top, and I go to the meetings and catch up with some of the people that raced. Unfortunately, 1 or 2 of them are no longer with us, but it's nice to catch up with people that I raced against. But there's so much motorsport on television, and I watch most of my motorsport from the armchair now, not the driving seat.
And drive it all the way around, but it's just amazing how it's progressed over the years. But you guys were the forerunners to something that's greater and better these days, and man, this book you put out is going to be somebody's going to get it. It's lucky it's out on sale now, isn't it? It's
out on sale now.
Yep.
And I've been told by all and sundry that it's a good read. It's not about lap times and tyre pressures and all that sort of thing. It's more about the characters that were in the motorsport in my day, the golden years of motorsport, when you could rub shoulders with Bruce McLaren, Denny Holm, Chris Amon, and I remember one of the characters from down your way, Bruce Abernethy.
Oh, yes.
He was a great speedway rider.
He was,
car racing, and he was always a character.
Yes.
Some of the tricks he got up to. They were great days.
They were.
And after the racing was over, you could have a beer and rub shoulders with world champions, and go to a barbecue, go water skiing, etc. It's all in my book. It tells you about the good times that we had, which is not the way motorsport is today. It's become very professional, and people pack their tent and go, and I don't think there's much social connection with these the drivers today, from what I've seen anyway.
Paul, we could talk for hours, and I mean, you mentioned the name Bruce Abernethy there. He just lived around the corner from me in Karori, but he's still mad in those days. But he was a great character in lots of ways, and it sounds like you're just exactly the same, Paul. And we loved this book. We'll be giving it away to one lucky listener, and if you can't get the book, folks, when I ask you to ring, you can get it from Paper Plus Select, and Take Note have got the book, and it's worth reading. Great Christmas present, if nothing else. Paul, we thank you for your time today, and have a very happy Christmas.
Yeah, the same to you.
Thank you very
nice
much.
To talk to you.
106.3 Beach FM.